My work in healing sessions is really about moving qi in the body. Qi is what we need to expand our mind, expand our creativity, have more life in life itself. Or if you take it to a different level, to the expansion of consciousness, people think that by knowing a lot of these different ideas of things, of how they work, that they are more spiritual. But then it's not about the book knowledge kind of a mind. It's a much more deeper sense of knowing, right? So what we see, like in Russia and Ukraine, it's just the beginning of a spiritual war that manifests in physical reality. So of course, there's going to be a collapse of the old system that we are born into and we all rely on, right? Because the conflict that's happening now on the planet is not going to end within 2 or 3 months or even 6 months. It may drag on for years.
Hello everybody, my name is Maria Kazarova and we are on our YouTube channel called The Secrets of Life. My guest today is Wang. He's a healer, a writer, a teacher based in Ubud, Bali. So Wang has a very interesting personal history. So I would like to start with that, and then our talk will flow to multiple directions. So it's going to be interesting. Hello, Wang.
Hello, Maria.
I'm happy to see you here.
Yeah, happy to be here. Very nice and cool space.
Can you tell a few words about yourself? What exactly do you do?
Well, if I have to sum it up in 1 or 2 words, everything that I express in terms of sharing information and my work in healing sessions is really about moving qi in the body. So moving qi is not a simple matter. It's not like, oh yeah, you go get a Coca-Cola or an espresso or a Red Bull and you feel stimulated. So it's more or less based on the old Taoist type of a worldview, right? Or you can say the Eastern worldview in general, because qi is defined as light, as consciousness, as this force. Like in the Indian system, they would call it prana or shakti, and they even have a god. They call it Agni. Agni is like the god of fire, and he's also like the messenger. So qi, is what we need to have more of, if we want to expand our mind, expand our creativity, have more life in life itself. Or, if you take it to a different level, to the expansion of consciousness. So the whole aspect of spirituality, longevity, vitality, is all based on qi. And it's actually the idea of Kundalini, awakening in the system, is that initial seed, is that initial spark, that fire that ignite the being and allow it to step into more of a closer space to the true self.
What is true self? How do you see this?
We all have it, but through our mind, through our emotions, through our senses, this vehicle is overwhelmed by the impressions of the physical reality. So true self is a state of being that is always present, but more like in the background. So to experience that, it's a reason for pretty much most of the people who seek, the idea of God, or Brahman or Buddha or whatever that you choose to call it, source in the modern day, is the state of void, or the state of the all. And then outflow from that, you have everything else. So we are a part of that everything else. All of creation is. It's just like a scale of awareness and consciousness. And human beings are, at the space where it's unique in the sense that we can, if we are willing to cultivate. I don't like to use the word spiritual and all that stuff. In the modern day, it just seems so fruitful, and it lost all its original meaning pretty much. So, to inner cultivate is kind of like the Zen idea of chop wood, carry water. You have to work through certain techniques and methods that we all have as a heritage from all these paths that have been existing for humans for thousands of years or even millions of years, depending on our idea of how far human history have extended to. And so they are like unique kind of techniques, right, to kind of move a certain process. I mean, it's just like if you want to build muscles, you use weights, right, and then you eat protein and eat a lot of fat, and then you build your being. And then if you want to be like a marathon runner, you do more carbs, and then you cut down a lot of muscle mass, so you can be lighter and you can have more endurance. So there is method for everything, including the inner path, and that is the thing that we pretty much lost, because in the old days, if you think about, if one is super serious about exploring this, you would seek out a teacher, and not everyone is accepted. Only the one that has a certain amount of focus, in a way, like a certain amount of talent that the teacher observes within the person, then that student is kind of slowly bringing into the inner sanctuary. After some testing and some years of, seemingly like doing nothing, right? You just wash laundry and you cook and all that stuff, and then all these chores make the slowly assimilate a person from a normal life, like the normal way of behaving and suffering, into a more peaceful state. And then once you arrive at a certain amount of quietness, then you are taken in to teach more techniques to speed up the process. So nowadays we kind of lose it, and we kind of have everything, but we don't have much of anything, because everything is watered out. And most people, I would say, kind of walk the path, but are not really so serious, and then they just grab everything that they can find, and then they kind of like a hodgepodge of many things. And so I feel like in the modern day, people are more into the mental outer aspect of the path versus like the inner quiet part of the chocolate and carry water.
Because now people want everything to happen very quickly, and I have a feeling that the whole human experience has become quicker and faster. It's a lot of happening in the mental area, in the mind, and it's super, super rapid.
Well, on the one hand, the universal energy is more open and available. Yes, so people can actually accomplish things much faster from my perspective and my experience of it, on the one hand, we do have access to energies that was harder to achieve in the past, right? And that's where like in the old text, you read stories of guys meditating for 10, 16 hours a day to just attain certain things. And nowadays it's more available, but then people still need to cultivate. Okay, so there are two aspects of it. At some point, it's really just all about the mind, right? But then it's not about the logical, intellectual mind or like the book knowledge kind of a mind. It's a much more deeper sense of knowing. So sometimes too much knowledge can hold you back, right? Because people think that by knowing a lot of these different ideas of things, of how they work, that they are more spiritual. Okay, so there is another way of measuring this, right? So, and it's based on the idea of qi. If you observe, all the spiritual masters, whoever you choose, like the real ones, right? Avatar, Babaji, Ramana Maharshi, or Sri Aurobindo, or Christ, people that we know and understand, they all hold power, right? True power, right? So this true power comes from a transformational process where their qi burn through many things and then they become one with everything in a way. So in a way, a lot of them have mastered the elements, right? So, and then even like mastering all the elements, in the world of Zen Buddhism, is still a very low accomplishment. So what I'm trying to say is that they live that qi within them. They all have an amazing energetic field.
Yes, but masters like Ramana Maharshi, they didn't pay much attention to the condition of their bodies.
Yes, well, that is kind of like his path, right? Because even within all the spiritual masters, they come for a certain task. Like Sri Aurobindo, where his ashram is, and Ramana Maharshi's ashram, it's about 2.5, 3 hours away. And they live and pass away about the same time. And Sri Aurobindo is really all about transformation at the cellular level. And Maharshi is really more like the working on the awakened mind, and he kind of talk in terms of the Zen, koans, to just twist the mind in such a way to frustrate it, and then it realize itself is just like bound by this outer reality. And Sri Aurobindo and the mother, who's like Sri Aurobindo's companion, used to send followers that got tired of this process of transformation to Ramana Maharshi's ashram for holidays.
Very interesting.
So they say, nowadays, we have no choice except to walk through this kind of transformation. And that is one of the reasons why within our lives and in the world, everything is in chaos, right? So you have to kind of like, in order for the old to die, to bring in the new, you gotta have this period where the old dies and then so the new can emerge. So what happened in that gap, is anybody's guess. If you read Sri Aurobindo's work, over 100 years ago, he talked about all these things. He is actually like seeing humanity in the evolutionary path toward this new age in a way, but not the new age as the new age has it now. So what I'm trying to say is that Ramana Maharshi approached it, in his way, which is like more like in the old school Zen. Most of the Zen masters in the 12th and 13th century, those who became self-realized, at the point of being their true self, only accomplish what Ramana Maharshi did. And Ramana didn't go any further. Some of his students had asked him, like, why you're not doing Sri Aurobindo's work? And he just said, I'm not here to do Sri Aurobindo's work. I'm here to be Ramana Maharshi. So he's more of a laid back. A lot of people are not going to be happy to hear that, but I actually have a great kind of a connection with Ramana Maharshi because I used to go to his ashram and I had a very powerful spiritual experience there, after being in his cave. And I'm in no means of trying to put him down. I'm just stating like what I observed to be his task and then some other people's task. But there are a wide range of these kind of possibilities, right? So being self-realized, it basically, one is in a state of seeing existence as it is. Because the mind never sees existence as it is. We see it through the many layers that we are trained and programmed to see.
Yeah, it's the Maya.
Yeah, and then we interpret reality. We don't see reality, right? So the whole idea of meditation and going to the state of Samadhi and then finally arrive at the state of seeing reality as it is and seeing how one is reflected in that and one's being is a part of that. It's just a very, like one of the initial stages that one has to arrive at before going through the process of transformation, the real transformation, to become like a full, Buddha. Within human history, in this root race, there are probably like 3 or 4 or 5 of those, like the real ones. And people cannot imagine what kind of possibilities that human potential hold, right? So we can only experience and understand reality based on our level of chi, which is our level of consciousness in a way. And then it's kind of like how I kind of make that analogy. It's like if you live in a basement all your life, you just experience that basement. And then slowly, as you walk up all the different levels of the building, then your vantage point is going to be different, right? A person living on the 10th floor, will see things in their surroundings very different from the one that lived on the first floor. And then if you arrive at like 100th floor, they're like, wow, the view is very different and your appreciation of that reality might be a little bit different. But this process is almost infinite. So that's where we all have our idea of what's real. That's completely okay. But then that reality, is based on where we are at, in our state of cultivation. I mean, you can add more knowledge to your base. You can understand more things going on in the world, or aliens, or spirits and entities and all these things. And then it'll enrich your experience. And in a way, it kind of expands your consciousness in a way, but then to truly expand your consciousness where you're walking in these realities, you have to open up this shell.
Yes, as far as I feel, what is happening at the moment, the whole planet Earth, our Gaia, is experiencing something like this big awakening. So the shift is massive, and all the people who now participate is that their karma to be here, and the experience they have is unique and very strong at the same time.
Sure.
A lot of people now at a very difficult point when they have to think about saving their lives and the lives of their children. And it's very difficult to practice in this situation. So because adrenaline goes up and they cannot, keep their adequacy.
Yeah.
So what would be your recommendation? So how can they stay mentally healthy and adequate in their reactions?
Okay. So before I go into that part, right? Like, I was born into a war. And then, and I was born under communism. And then I was a refugee. And then I ended up in the US as a teenager. And I was always curious of what happened, like human behavior. So basically, most humans are just reactive to the environment, right? So in order to go beyond that state, you basically have to be open-minded and spend a certain amount of time learning how our world really works. Who controls them, how wars are started, and then like to understand before something happens, that you can get an inkling of what's going on and prepare. Okay, like in the US, you have for decades already, like there's a certain group of people they're called preppers. These people, like the mainstream media, call them like paranoid and crazy and all that stuff, like preparing for the end days, the war and the food shortages and the crash of the financial system and all that stuff, right? But then now it's showing that they're correct.
Yes.
And then these people, a lot of them have homes away from the big city in case of a major war, and food prepared for 3 months or 6 months for the family or whatever. So, it is still not too late, to think in terms of like, where can I go? What can I do? And how do I prepare for, because the conflict that's happening now on the planet is not going to end within 2 or 3 months or even 6 months. It may drag on for years, because we now have a chance as a human race to be liberated from the powers that control us for thousands of years. So this is how big this conflict is. It's not so much as about China against the US and all that stuff. It's more like Russia and China against the satanic forces that control the government in the US and many governments around the world. It controls the financial system and many things, right? So, we are in a process of liberating in general, and then it's consistent with this energy, right? So there's a saying like, where there is truth, there's no darkness. So when the truth comes, then the darkness is going to have to be, in a way, wiped out or cleared out. So conflicts and wars, they just say, in a way, a necessary tool, because this force is not going to say, oh yeah, the truth comes, so we're going to pack up and leave, and then you guys can live your happy, love and light, and you don't have to fight or do anything.
It's not that easy.
Yeah, of course not. So they want to hang on, and they want to do everything that they can to hang on to power, hang on to control, and that's where like the physical conflict in the physical world it's just a part of this experience, right? So, I always believe in the, in the process of self-cultivation, like to understand, because I've been following this whole world event thing for over 20 years, right? So I have a certain understanding of what's going on and why. Even now, I follow it very closely. And that's how I ended up, here, moving out of Bali, and then spent the last 4 or 5 years really prepared, at all the levels I'm talking about, right? So, this aspect of having some time, or taking some time to have some kind of a practice, whatever you do, right? Just some quiet moment to listen to some relaxing music, and as simple as, breathing exercises, which nowadays on YouTube you can always learn. There's no reason that any of us don't learn something different and new to help to enhance our experience, right? Or doing some qigong, doing some yoga stretches, or just sit quietly, or if you have the fortune of surrounded by trees and parks and forests, go take a walk in nature. So a lot of the fear that we experience is because humans have been isolated from our natural world, especially if you live in a big city, or every time I go to Singapore for 2 or 3 days, I come back completely exhausted because it's just city Wi-Fi, and really super toxic food, right? Well, that is the nature of how this control system trying to suppress humanity, right? You put fluoride in the toothpaste and fluoride in the water and fluoride in your teeth and heavy metals in your teeth in the old days. And fluoride makes the mind obedient. So anyway, along with TV and all these things. So there are a lot of things that people can do, to find alternative source of information that are a little bit more accurate, or to just be in nature and allow this intuitive sense to be stronger, and you follow it.
How can you detox the pineal gland from fluoride?
Well, there are actually methods that you can find, on the internet. There's a lot of different ways. I just believe in detoxing the body in general, right? Because the human body is bombarded with so many layers of toxicity. You have the food, the water, the air. For many decades, they've been spraying a lot of chemtrails in the atmosphere. And these chemtrails are like a chemical soup that eventually will affect the lungs, and then it goes into the food source, go into the water source, and then the auto exhaust, the indoor toxicity from just the mold and not enough fresh air and what have you, especially when you live in the city and in the winter, everything is shut, so you don't basically have fresh air. And so there are many things that you can do to try to kind of make that less of an impact on your health. And and even in our modern day, Wi-Fi, computer, and all this stuff is toxic for the human body. But there are also ways to try to reduce that and eliminate that. So all of these things intrude into our body. But our body is mostly water, and it runs on energetic frequency. So to detox the body, at a commercial level, you can tell people, yeah, you can come for a 1-day detox or 1 week detox, or even a 1 month kind of detox, and you'll feel better, right? Because the body holds so much toxicity that everything kind of get stagnant in the way it functions. And then when you remove a certain amount of that, you feel better and lighter and whatever. But in reality, how I experience detoxing the body, and I do it myself, it's kind of like a lifetime of work, right? So, if you imagine the human system like a fish aquarium, right? You can pour the fresh water in, like I have one now. Every time my clients come on a day that we change water, everyone is so impressed at how clear the tank is. And then after 2 or 3 days, the algae start to grow, and then like the water become a little bit more murky. And well, we can change a fish tank, but in the human body, we live with the sack of water all our lives, right? So, until I'm aware of, I could actually detox my body, I just put things in and never even thought about that you can cleanse the inner system. Until that was introduced into my life, it's like, wow, it's a whole different experience, right? All the years of toxicity that got built up in the body, and then you try to release it as much as possible. And as we live, especially when you fly around, and airplane air is toxic, and you're sitting inside a microwave, right? So the whole body is challenged, and that's why air travel is so exhausting. Besides the time zone aspect of it, it's these other factors too that affect the whole system. So I see, like, I do some form of detox every day, right? And then I try to now, like, eat less. My body actually naturally bring me to the state, of eating less than I used to. So, so then that helps to kind of reduce the burden. And then, I focus, instead of eating on the quantity of food, I focus on the quality of the food. Then I eat less, but then more nutritious, and that's enough. And then I also take herbs and supplements a lot, so that is a way to keep the system going. So like a normal, healthy body, when your liver is working, your kidneys are working, and your lungs are working properly, your body has a way of moving the toxicity out. But it seems like for most humans, at some point, the level of toxicity that enters will overwhelm the internal system ability to purge the toxicity. And then after that singular event, right, then your body starts to accumulate toxicity inside. So like years ago, I learned about this liver flush, the one with the olive oil and Epsom salt and things like that. I mean, it's not an easy thing to do, but then I noticed, because at that time I was really into yoga practice. Every time I did a liver flush, I go to yoga, I would be like about an inch more flexible. The body just more open and limber in general in all the joints. Like in Chinese medicine, they connect the liver and the tendon to be one thing. So when the liver become toxic, then the tendons become hard. And that's where, like, you see people who are older have a tendency to have tight joints. And then if you look at their gut, the rib cage have a tendency to extend out. That is usually like a fatty liver. got too much toxicity, so the liver is cell engorged. So all of these things are connected, if you know what to look for.
So it's much better to go to a specialist than experiment at home with different detoxes. Or are there any easy things that people can do themselves to support themselves when they're in a city and they want to detox somehow and feel better?
Yeah. Well, there are like many layers of that, right? The people I see usually have some kind of a health symptom. So they kind of want to find out how to solve it, right? So, they would come to somebody like me or anybody whose practice involves some level of detox and using herbs or supplements to help to rebuild the body, right? Or you can spend some time learning and then to use the herbs like for Ming herbs and happy tea. We actually made a lot of videos, to show like all the different processes, all the knowledge that one needs, like how to do a cleanse, and why you do it this way, and then what herb you need and how much to take and all these kind of details. So, we're focusing like we are not like trying to sell our products in that way. We try to give information and educate. And then if people see value in it, then they can try it, right? So we don't go like, oh, this is the best, but that's a waste of energy.
Because I love these teas. So they help a lot and I could feel the effects immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hang, can you tell how you started to learn herbalism?
Well, okay. So when I was in my early 30s, I was already starting to have health issues, right? Like lower back pain, like chronic lower back pain. I used to drive from the Los Angeles area up to San Francisco area. That usually like about 6-7 hour drive. And I just couldn't sit without like pain in the lower back type of a thing. And that already happened for some years. And then some other health issues. And so when I went to school, I was very fortunate to be at that school at that time because there were like 3 teachers there that completely out of the box. Like one teacher, he created esoteric acupuncture. He's more like, he doesn't want to admit it, but his path is more like the Zen, Buddha's path. And I see him as someone who kind of gone ahead, at some level. So I learned from him for about 10 years, right? So I got acupuncture from him very regularly. I took his classes, took his acupuncture workshops and things like that. And then I have another teacher who's like a chiropractor, and he was working for his PhD in biochemistry. And the man has an amazing brain, right? Sometimes I wish I can just cut his head off and plop it on mine. It's like, whoosh, all this knowledge. And he is amazing. If you ever listen to him talk, he not only understands the science down to the little details and all that stuff, which my mind, it doesn't really work that way. And he can link it to this whole idea of qi, of how when you move qi through, you can magnify all the effects of the herb, your practice, everything, right? So that is the one element that I feel like is sorely missing. Yeah, because how I approach things have a tendency to be like an overall. You talk about nutrition, you talk about all the things to avoid, to just maintain the system, and then to go to the core of, weaknesses in the internal organs and in the hormonal glands. That is basically at the physical level is the primary source of problem. And then the inner environment, like the quality of the water, right? So these three physical things are probably like some of the main cause, because a healthy system will eventually show symptoms and then lack of energy and deeper symptoms, mostly because of lifestyle. That's a big thing. And it's something that we can completely control in a way, right? So I learned, I learned a certain amount of not only herbalism, because herbalism is just like, you learn how to use a fork. And then, it's great for a fork for the pastas and many things. But then when you eat soup, you cannot use a fork, right? So you kind of have to like develop a larger toolbox. So so I was involved in herbalism at the beginning, more like for self-help. Like my teacher, who's an acupuncturist, like in the first or second lecture in the class, he gave us a formula to how to clean the gut. And then there were like 2, 3, 4 of us was really gung-ho about the process. So we went to one of the herbal shops, we ordered all the herbs, and then we get the little machine to make the capsule. We used to make these humongous capsules, and then we just pop them. Because when he said about colon cleansing, I look at him, it's like, at that time I was relatively fit, right? It's kind of similar to how I'm now. I went through a period that I was not as fit as I'm now. I was like, 6-pack, very lean. I look at him, it's like, you think I need this? And he just looked at me, he's like, try it. So I went home, I made the capsules and I popped them. I was surprised at what came out of me. Even at the very supposedly healthy and lean stage in my life, right? Because the accumulation is there from like many years of sometime wrong eating, sometime whatever happened. I mean, I always have very good bowel movements, but still I was very surprised at what came out of me, right? Leave alone like some people are constantly constipated. So the amount of accumulation is much greater. So I learned more from using the herb and feeling its effect on my body. And then for many years I would sell these prepared herbal caps from other companies that I feel like has good high quality herb. So then, and I also learned about herbalism then, right? So what happened was, I used to own a spa in Los Angeles. And then, after I didn't own it anymore, then I was actually experiencing an adrenal burnout. I would sleep at nighttime 10, 11 hours, wake up feeling tired, and then I would take like a 2-3 hour nap on the couch every day. So then, after a couple of weeks, I was feeling like I have to help myself to get stronger, because during that time I was kind of traveling, but not really, because I didn't have the energy. So I went to Chinatown, and then I bought a bunch of the tonic herbs, and then I make them into formulas. So, and then I would make a pot of tea every day, and I would drink that pot, whatever, and then for like a month, then I feel I have not 100% power, but like about 60-70% better than I was. Then I started to travel. What this was like, perhaps my the beginning process, of making these formulas, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and then some months later, I left the U.S. and I didn't really have a lot of money, right? I left the U.S. with like $900, and some products or whatever. I went to India. I lived there for 6 months, right? So after living in India for 1 month, I ran out of money altogether. I was like, okay. So, but I always have skill that I can work to make money.
Mm-hmm.
So I started to work, and I brought some herbs with me that are prepared, and then I make money and I sell the herb. And the year after, I met my ex-wife, and so we traveled some more. And then, what was needed at that time besides my practice, because when I was practicing in Los Angeles, I always have other people, to refer people to, or to buy the herbs that they need from some other company. And here I am, like all by myself, in Egypt and in Europe, and I even went to Russia, St. Petersburg, to offer like workshops and seeing people, and I have no herbs. So we found a way to ship the herb to Europe,
Mm-hmm.
and then, we gather them, like we would have the powders came in, and then from the powder, I would make the formulas, and everywhere we go, we would hire a person to make the capsules for us. And I would see like a house full of people, because I also have the Rife machine that are very helpful in clearing like pathogens and parasites, like things like herpes and Lyme disease, and all sorts of things. Like in Bali, a lot of typhoid and dengue, malaria and things like that could be treated with like 1 or 2 treatments per pathogen, right? So we have like a room full of people hooked onto the machine, and then I'm consulting, and then I'm working, and then I have another person sitting in the living room making the capsules, put them in a bag, and then that was like the beginning of the herbal business. So when I came to Bali, I went to the shops, and they pretty much like nothing useful in terms of herb. So we figured out how to bring things in and start the company. So, and then like between the time, there are certain formulas that I know, kind of like the formula to clean the kidneys and formula for the liver and the colon, was our basic first. And then when I started to settle here, I was thinking people need more.
That is true.
Yeah, so I spent like about 3 years researching and studying, and because I traveled to so many places,
Mm-hmm.
my interest is always in herbs a lot. We were in like the more western part of Siberia, and then I bought some of the teas from the Altai. They're amazing, right? So that kind of like spiked my interest to learn about some of the Russian herbs. And then we actually have a few products now that are purely from Russia.
Like chaga.
Yeah, chaga, the red reishi, red root, marrow root, eleuthero, and then another one, 202.
Hang some traditional herbalists, they believe that only the herbs that grow around the place where you live should be used.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
people have many beliefs, right? Kind of like for the colon cleanse. It doesn't matter where you're from, you take it, and for the most part, it works. So, and then like our herbs is, our line of product is actually like international herbs. So, I have this kind of like a weird idea that from the beginning, like every region has its own super herb, right? In China, the ginseng and some of these other things like the, and then in Russia, you have the red root, the rhodiola, and then in South America, you have the suma, and North America, you have the American ginseng and some other herbs that are native to it. And Africa and India, ashwagandha, tusi, and I found some really like not well-known herbs, but are very effective. So, and because of my travel, I thought, why don't I just get a lot of these super herbs and put them into a formula? It works.
So this sounds like the new age, new world medicine, like your United Energy, new world medicine.
Yeah. Well, I think you have to look at the history of herbalism, right? Because many centuries ago, herbalists used whatever they have available. And then trade started, like if you're like, if you look at the history of Chinese herb, they started at the Silk Road. And then some of the herb from the Middle East, I even use herbs that are unique to like the western part of India, more like into the Muslim regions, right? So then you have an exchange of herbs, and then people figured out how it works and blend them together. And back in the days, the mindset is more regional. Then people just use whatever they have. Like the Chinese would not imagine the suma existed in the Amazon.
I see.
Right? And the Amazonians would not think that, something like rhodiola, exists in their world. So, but in a modern day, the human being, I feel like, is mostly very similar in certain ways. And then you have variations, depending on the region, right? So, and it usually, for the most part, works. So you take this kind of a tribal idea, into this kind of like a global idea of mixing the best. It kind of like, I see like Russia has a great culture, right? Its people has its core, like whatever kind of still relatively intact. But it doesn't mean that we cannot learn more from other cultures, to widen our perspective. Like my core, if you really deal with me on a daily basis, like my way of looking at the world is very much Asian. But then my mind is also very Western, in many ways. So kind of like you take the positive from every place and gel them together into something that is new. Like, the Westerners look at me would not think that I am, my mind, at least my perspective, is even sometimes more white than white, right? And the Asian look at me, they don't recognize me as an Asian either. So it's okay. So herb-wise, like everything else, I don't believe in all these limitations. And maybe there's a certain benefit to it, and maybe not.
Yeah, we will live and see, because it looks like all the limitations have to leave our space after some long transformation that we are living through.
Yeah.
So I believe that. I'm quite positive about this, but it will take some time. Yes.
Sure. Well, it's, sometimes in the alternative world, people may not be as realistic. They have their own belief system, and then they impose that belief system as their expression, right? kind of like, kind of like an acupuncturist, and or like a nutritionist, or like a shaman. If they're like confident about what they do, many of them think that that's the one thing that you need to solve everything. In reality, it doesn't work that way, right? So, and that's where, and that's also why the reason I accumulate a lot of methods in a way, or knowledge, but ultimately, I just look at the system and see like where it's at and how you can improve that process, right? The one thing that I learned very early on in school is how to break into the body, like to clear trauma and to move chi. And that is really like the ultimate goal of healing, right? Because most people don't feel well, or they're a little bit sick, or a little bit have certain symptoms. Behind everything is the lack of chi. And then a lot of people lack of chi because the traumas that is stored in the body create a certain level of stagnation, right? Because the stagnation or the trauma have been so normalized, so integrated into the system, that we don't feel it anymore. Kind of like if you hurt your arm and your arm's a little bit limpy, maybe in the first days or first 2 weeks or 2 months, you may feel like it's slightly limpy. But then if you can't solve it, then it becomes normal. This is how you are. But it's really not how you are. How you are was the original state of pureness. So with human existence, I would say that most people are traumatized.
Yes, that's
at
true.
a certain level. So then these kind of, every time we experience trauma, right, whether it's physical injuries or emotional or mental or even at the spiritual level, it altered our being slightly. We're not operating according to this pureness anymore. And then when the system adapts, that's the nature of human beings. We adapt. If our left leg is weak, we rely on our right leg more. And then with time, the left leg becomes weaker. If we don't actively work on strengthening our left leg. So it goes in everything, right? And that's where like I love the philosophy behind Chinese medicine, because it goes from emotional states to color to symptoms and how everything is connected all together to the elements. It's a relatively, if you look at most of the healing system, that is relatively a complete way of looking at the human body. So somebody come in like, oh, my lungs don't feel well, and whatever. Then you have to think about grief, sadness, and maybe there is an infection, but then that infection is secondary or tertiary to this, oh, I miss my mommy, or I don't get love enough, or whatever, right? So, but then a lot of that could be traced back to like a child that doesn't get enough love, or mommy and daddy, broke up, and then that creates sadness in the whole family, or somebody in the family died, and that emotion never got resolved. So it stays, and then it creates a stagnation, which is like a weakness in the energy field. And then this weakness start to build up, and that is also one of the reasons why, some people get prostate cancer, some people get heart disease, some people get lung cancer, and some people get skin cancer, what have you. All of these variations is also based on the initial state of trauma. And then if you look deeper, it's also based on the karmic experience that people carry through. So you have to look at it from that perspective, because healing is not so much as, somebody come in, and then you write a prescription or even like a herbal formula, and then like, oh, everything's good. Yes, the herb can help to solve the symptoms.
For a while.
Yeah, yeah, and then the person had a similar experience or even like a deeper experience, and the system go back to the same way that it reacts, to. So it's just a way, like, to me, healing is more about one's ability to perceive and listen, right? That, and then one can, once you feel that or hear that or see that, say, okay, then you can use the herbs to kind of draw out the symptoms, and then to use other things to kind of make the whole background more whole. But then people have to also see it that way and do it that way. Because a lot of people just want to, I just want to solve this and move on with life. I don't have time to deal with things.
Okay, but how to connect to this purity to get the insights about the reasons of what is happening?
Well, some people are very receptive and they're, willing to explore. But most people may not, right? Because fear, fear of looking at the shadow, or because when you start to open up the subconscious, which is what the physical body holds, sometimes all this memory float up, right? Yeah, like in Los Angeles, I was working on this woman. She was into a pretty bad car accident. And I worked on her, and she seemed to be a little bit shocked. And then she went away. And we didn't see her for like 9 months, and then I'd had the spa back then, and then she came back, and then we asked her, wow, haven't seen you for a while, what's going on? So she was telling the story that when I was working on her, she had the memory of the accident that she had no memory of prior to. Like her mind just blanked it out, right? And it scared her. So, you take situation like that and you apply it to abandonment, parents separating, assault, rape, and all this stuff. That's big. It could be very scary. But it's just one of those stages when, when people's ready to step into it, then they will step into it. So like before the COVID, I was very busy. Not from seeing like a handful of people every week, which I don't like, right? So it was more like seeing one person every 6 months or a year. That's like how long it takes for the person to usually process one of those experiences. So they come to Bali. It's a nice hub for many people to travel. They had the session, they do whatever they do, and then they leave. And then the next time they come back, they're always trying to arrange a session, and then they leave. That actually worked quite well. So anyway, but, if you look at it from another perspective, it's really about karma. Because we all come with a certain amount of suffering laced into our process. It's unavoidable. It's more like how much willingness we are willing to move through that process. Not hiding from it, not trying to avoid it, not feeling like I saw love and light, I'm good, I'm healed.
So this sounds like an escape.
It is a form of escape, what that is a part of the New Age problem, right? Because it's all about this mental construct that people make. To stay in the love and light while the shadow rot out the whole physical, tangible reality.
Because many people, they stay in love and light only in their illusions, but they do nothing in the reality.
Sure. Well, Yeah, I mean, a part of the inner cultivation, this is the big chunk of it. It's in the process of transformation, right? It's a process of transform the present you into a more refined you. So, all the mind patterns, like my mom is very critical. It took me many, many, many years to kind of clear that from my being, right? I'm not sure if I'm even free from it at the moment, right? It's like, and it just, and the criticalness, the judgment, and then all the other thoughts of sin and guilt and anger and jealousy and pettiness and blah, blah, blah. I mean, the list goes on and on and on, right? So at the mental level, you basically have to clear all of these things from your being, in order to get liberated into this state of being more neutral. Like things come at you and then you just work to solve it, that type of a thing, right? So, but that is very difficult. I mean, you have to really look deep down into the demons within the being. So this love and light thing just don't cut it.
Yes, so I feel that now it's like a high time to solve the inner conflicts because many people have to work together on a better world. So if we have inner conflicts, they start to happen outside.
Yeah. Well, usually, like what I see is people get into this kind of a spiritual party, spiritual kind of denial, and then at some point they hit with something, like either a more serious illness or a car accident, and something happened to them that they have to examine their reality, that kind of break them, and then in these moments of being broken is when you have a chance to really peer through certain veils. It doesn't mean that you can peer through the final veil, but that there's so many layers of it. But then kind of like a beginning path to kind of like move through, right? So a lot of it is just, in a lot of the teachings in the East, they have this word called sincerity. It's a very scary word. Like, to be sincere means that there's no bullshit in you anymore. None, zero. I have a friend, like, he and I are like, kind of like brothers in the spiritual world for different lifetimes. And he's maybe 10, 15 years older or 20 years older. And he always like, oh man, sincerity is a very scary word. I mean, he went through his history, right? He had like drug abuse and problem family and many years of trying to be like a sannyasi, and then ended up with like, sleeping with all the women that he meets along the way. But that is also his mentality of thinking of that is sinful. It had nothing to do with being with women in general, right? So it's just his mindset that, oh, that's so sinful that I shouldn't do. So that would pull him down a couple notches energetically. So for him to really look at himself in the clear light is very scary for him. So he always like, even though he's sincere about trying to move forward and then quite intuitive and sensitive in general, but a part of him is still like trying to, squeaking through something. It's very, very interesting to observe. But that's already somebody who's willing to like look at their shadow and willing to dive in, and it just, because humans, we always like find this way of
not doing this,
covering things over, right? We're trying to find the higher essence of it, even though like in reality, we're just doing whatever everybody's doing. I mean, that's okay. It's just all of it is part of the process. And then when you can throw out all this guilt and all these attachment, you can actually have everything. You can have wealth, you can have, as much love and sex as you can handle, but then you just don't get attached. That is like the big difference, right? But then most of the people who are interested in the path still, see all of these as separate and they should not mix. Maybe they should. I mean, we're at an age where anything is possible if we're doing it in the right way. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, Hang, I know you were a child when you had to leave Vietnam because of war with your parents. So can you tell about this experience? So what happened then, how it affected you in the future?
Yeah, okay. Well, it seems like many, many lifetimes ago, but I was actually born in a clinic, I was born in North Vietnam. So in that year, that time, there was a lot of bombings. So after I came out, there was like, the air raid was like half an hour in, right? And the bombs just flying in different parts of the city and explosions. So they just wrapped me up before they cleaned me and my mom, and then put me into like a bomb shelter. And then half an hour later, when things are clear, they took everyone out, cleaned everyone, and that kind of happened again, like in 1972, and I was a little bit older, and we basically, like, when it started to have the air raid, we basically just pack up all the children, and with my grandma, moved to the countryside. So it's kind of like an interesting environment, because as I recall, more like the feeling of it, like all of a sudden the city become like very quiet, and there's a certain level of fear floating in the air, right? Because everyone is worried. If they're kind of like a lottery thing, whether you're going to get hit or you don't get hit. So but then people do just adjust. Of course, life is completely the normal life as we experience it as a community and neighbors. It's completely gone, because everyone just moved out of the city to avoid the bombing and hoping to survive it. So it definitely like involve a certain amount of hardship, because there's very little ways to make money. I mean, this is like in the 70s, so it's a whole different environment than now. Now you have cryptos, you have things that are more connected and in a way kind of like easier. But then back then, what you have is what you have. So when we moved to the countryside, my grandma doesn't really have a way to make money. So it was my mom in the city. She kind of sold herbs and medicine that were smuggled over from China, to people who needed, because all the medicine back then was shipped to the front line for the soldiers. So within the population, there's almost nothing. So they were like human mules that carry big backpacks of herbs, over to Vietnam, and then sell it within like a network of the Chinese. And then my mom was like the end retailer in a way. So this is how we, used to make money. But then like in the countryside, we just eat whatever is available, whatever money that my mom sent over. I mean, back then there was no DHL, post office, or telegram, or whatever, It's more like we find somebody who travel like some truckers that drive things past where we stayed in the village to the city, and then my grandma would, give a trucker that she trusts, like basically somebody she never known before. But then in the old days, people were a lot more trustworthy back then, right? So she gave the trucker a letter, and the trucker, when arrived in the city, would find my parents, give them the letter, and then my mom would send some money through the trucker to us in the village so we can buy some rice and some food. So there were a lot of times when all we have is some rice, so my grandma, it's actually my grandfather was a herbalist, but he's not like a city herbalist. He's more like a mountain herbal harvester. So he was working like that for maybe about 20 some years before he settled down and get married and all that stuff. So anyway, she understands certain weeds that you can eat. And so on a day that we have no food, she would ask my sister and I to go into the field and harvest some weed, and she boiled it up in some water and salt, and that's our meal, right? So life is very simple. It basically, when we moved to the village, there's no house, nothing. And then my father's friend, who helped us to get there, spent like a couple of days with some other men, building us a mud home, and then with like this leafy roof. And that was our home for like almost a year. So everything got really simplified, and food is scarce. But at least we didn't get bombed, except for one time, very close. So yeah, anyway, I mean, but what it does is that it kind of make me very not prone to many things in life, because you've seen like some of the worst things that can happen. So the body actually become hardened in a way, like your mindset become hardened. So sometimes like the easy life, make people soft, right? People who go through a lot of experiences, sometimes suffering and tragedy and war, are usually much more stronger in the core. And when things happen outside, you don't freak out, and you don't misbehave, and then go into this state of, in a way, non-functional, right? Because if you lose your ability to think out of the situation or emotionally react to things too much, then you kind of lose control of the situation. And that's actually not good.
Also, I would like to say that before people had the knowledge, they learned a lot, because now people are very much attached to the internet.
Yeah.
Like, for example, if now a common person goes to the forest and has to stay there for a while, he or she will not be able to build a house or to choose herbs. So
well, that's
a
true.
Yeah.
We spend many years, like even not something even that extreme, right? Most people are very dependent on eating out in the restaurant.
Yes.
Most people don't prepare their own food, so that alone create a lot of conflict within the person. So there's a certain amount of self-care, certain amount of understanding of how to do this, or even like start a fire, or prepare matches and lighters and whatever, So I think nowadays it's unrealistic to like run into the wild to survive. So our home is like our security, and then you prepare that, for the home.
So, but now many people were not prepared for what is going on now. And what can you recommend to them? So what are the small things they can do in the current situation?
Well, I mean, kind of have to go back to basics. You know, like part of prepping, you know, is this: before you prep, you have to know the reason why you prep, right? And then once you know the reason why, and you believe in it, then your action going to become more consistent. You know, so I've been following like the ongoings of the world at a deeper level. You know, not at the level of the CNBC and Fox News or RT and all this stuff, but the alternative news where people that used to work within the government or within certain projects are coming out to warn other people, hey, this is coming. You know, so even when I was living in Los Angeles, way before all this chaos, I already have this mindset of everywhere I live, I prepare. You know, food, some this and some that, water, especially when you live in the city. So that is a necessary part. You know, if you don't, like most people have 1 to 3 days of food at home. That's the majority of the people. You know, when the financial system breaks down, I'm not talking about a war. Like now the shooting war is limited, right? But the financial war is big. It's much bigger than the shooting war. So you have to have some resources and prepare for that. You know, and then if you don't prepare for that, then, you know, you got to have certain amount of food at home that lasts like a month, up to 3 months. And hopefully they're more or less healthier version. You know, you can choose. You can get like canned tuna or canned fish, and then some canned vegetables, or like I would stock up on some superfood. You know, that is also one of the reasons why I created this line of supplements. You know, like the superfood, like, you know, every time we buy spirulina, we buy like 10 kilo, right? Or some other wheatgrass, or we don't use wheatgrass, but like, you know, alfalfa grass and some of these things.
Why don't you use wheatgrass? Because many people are fans of wheatgrass.
Well, I think wheat has this thing with pectin, you know, and a lot of people don't do well with it. So we're kind of trying to make a green superfood, but trying to kind of avoid some of the things. Well, wheatgrass is quite nutritious in certain ways. You know, kind of like if you do research on YouTube or some site, some people swear by it and they recommend it to everyone, and some people say don't touch it, you know. So fresh wheatgrass is actually a very powerful nutrient, you know, if your body can assimilate it, right? And that's part of it too. It's what your body can assimilate. But then in this kind of a more practical, kind of a survival, you know, you just do the best you can to just have food, to maintain a certain amount of health along the way. Because like everything else, you know, everything has a beginning and everything has an end. You know, and this process that we are going through now may be, you know, over an extended years. So it's still not too late to prep, right? Because you think you don't have anything now, and then who knows? In 6 months you can even have less.
Yeah. Okay. So what are the best superfoods that people can prep for such a situation?
Well, I mean, it's kind of like you can get your canned food, dehydrated food, some power herbs.
For example.
Well, you can have like acai berry, you know, they come in a frozen thing. I'm not talking about just about dry things, right? I'm talking about like if your city has electricity, you can always buy an extra freezer and stock things up. Like, you know, I've been stocking up we have like 2 freezers, and 2 fridges at home. In Bali, where you can buy food fresh every day, right? But so like our freezer, we have fish, we have chicken, and then like blueberries, frozen blueberries, and so we try to be like as healthy as possible without like stocking up on potato chips and all these other type of food, right? And then I use them for my smoothies every day, but then I restock them, in case one day we need it in when the supply kind of ends, then we have to stretch it, right? So meanwhile, I use them and rotate them. And then we have a lot of spirulina, a lot of kind of like extracts of herbs that are high in vitamins and things like that. So we make it into formula to sell, but we also have a stock of it in case we have to use it for our own use. But you can always you can buy like 2 or 3 10 kilo of spirulina, stick it in the fridge, and it lasts a long time. And that's a very good source of protein and amino acids and all sorts of vitamins that you may need. So at that point, you eat to survive. It's not like you're going to go to a French restaurant and order your escargot and, and whatever fine food, So kind of like the mindset will shift to the reality that you face. Things that we consider to be hard now, and when we have to deal with it, the human system is very adaptable, so we can just change and move into that. So if you're properly prepared, then you can have things that you have. Yeah.
Okay, so one more question. There is a lot of stress, in the situation of war or in the situation of uncertainty. So what's the best way to maintain the immune in good condition? When there is a shortage of this and a shortage of that?
There's a natural thing that we can do, right? So you can sun your body, and then if you have sunlight at some level, I know that in people living in the north, it's difficult to have it in the winter time. But then you can also buy these infrared lights, right? And you can, I think in Bali, you can buy them for like 500,000-600,000 rupiah. And you can get 1 or 2, and then you can get sun that way. And that helps with the immune system. And especially if you have the privacy, you just bathe in the light naked, and then it'll give you even like more power within the system, because we all need to make vitamin D3. So we can get that free from the sun, right? So, and then the infrared light, I just say a good alternative. Like in places like Seattle in the US, where they have like 70% of the time of the year where it's rainy and cloudy, or even higher. So they have a really high rate of depression. So most of the homes would have like a light system for people to sunbathe or light bathe or whatever, to maintain their mood. It's very important. Usually. And then they can also practice Qigong or some kind of a movement of the body. Is because when you move the body produces healthy hormones that enhances your body, instead of like sitting all day or lying down all day. It will shift your mood to more positive ways of being, right? So, and that is, you can do at home, and for the most part is free. And then if you have extra resources, you can buy vitamin D3, vitamin C, and just stock it up, whatever you have, right? So that's, or you can buy like berries and frozen fruit, or like dehydrated things, and then canned meat. You can get cow, chicken, fish, whatever, because the human body does need a certain amount of protein.
So will be a hard time for vegans and vegetarians if they got isolated like this.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, there have been 0 civilizations that are built on veganism, nor vegetarianism. It never existed in the human world. I know that some people say, oh yeah, we're moving into this new age and you don't need meat and to ascend and all that stuff.
Or don't need food at all to ascend, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, everything is a possibility, right? So if you look at the human system, we have a reservoir of a storage of minerals and fat and protein, and then some people have more abundance of it, some people has less abundance of it. And you can actually survive on your inner resources for a certain period of time, right? So it's kind of like a form of your body's eating itself. It extracts the resources that it needs for the body to live and to function. And you can do that without inputting in the needed nutrients, right? So, and then many people actually, after doing this for some years, become depleted. I'm not saying that everyone gets depleted, but the majority of the people that try this way become depleted. I mean, locally, you can just go to some of the health food stores and you see a lot of people with no muscle mass, men too. Like their tissue is just hanging on the bone and whatever. That is just lack of muscle mass, and that's a big deficiency in protein, because you need bricks and cement or steel to build a structure. When you take that all away and you're like, oh yeah, you can use some sand and mud. Sure, you can slap it together, but it's not strong. So, and then a lot of these guys also like complaining why, they can't get it up or can't get up for a long period of time, because it takes a lot of energy to go through that process, right? It's all connected. And then, when people start out on a veganism and vegetarianism, they feel great, and they should, kind of like the body become lighter, and then you have more extra energy. But then as your system start to burn more over a long period of time, and then you introduce stress and other factor to it, it don't need the resources. When it doesn't get enough resources, then your body will go through a period of eating itself. And then after that period is when people are starting to feel, or like during that, people start to feel exhausted and then deficient. And then if they don't change their way, then more deeper symptoms will start to appear. Most of the clients that come to see me are vegetarian and vegan, maybe because I live in Bali, right? So you have like, after they've done it for some years, they feel like, oh, I'm losing my hair, and like my nails are weak and whatever, like all sorts of symptoms. It's stemming from the lack of foundation in the diet.
Yeah, I see. So now many practitioners, many meditators, they talk about ascension, and that is going to happen, and they are following up there. Maybe some of them by losing their physical body. So what can you say about this process and this tendency? So what is going on?
Well, it's possible. I mean, anything is possible, right? But just looking at it from a practical point of view, like from my understanding of the human energetics, and then, well, I have to say that like my approach to these things, like spirituality and food and all that stuff, is from the old school, right? I mean, I study some of these beings that got somewhere, and then what happened to their health, and which person do the best, what do they use, what do they practice, and all of this stuff. So, okay, yes, the energy is more abundant, but we're not gonna evaporate into this fifth dimension or the 10th dimension just like that. As long as one has a physical body, it doesn't matter if you don't eat or you don't do anything. It's not going to transform without inner cultivation. It just won't happen. I mean, yes, you can meditate, but meditation is not yet meditation until you can still your mind. And then other things like your chi become more open, and then they can become more abundant, and then become more filling, and then your chakras become more developed, formed. So that alone takes years of work. It's not something that you just sit there and then you're hoping for that, right? So within that kind of a energetic structure, you also have to deal with all the lessons of each chakra kind of, need to open it up. So if you have like the root chakra issues, survival, sexuality, and all these things, if a person haven't dealt with that and all they do is sit, it won't open. And actually a lot of the guys that they think they ascend somewhere, have a lot of deep survival issues, right? And then, spirituality can be used as a form of escapism, and there's no free lunch. People think that, because I'm doing this, therefore I'm going to get there. Maybe not. But what it depends on is this vehicle has to be prepared for it, and it has to go through the different stages of openness. Well, that's like the, how I explain to my students who learn Qigong, right? So you have two energetic processes mainly. So when we practice Qigong or meditation, part of the goal is to open up the Qi channels. You open up the main channel, which is like the people experience it as a rising of the Kundalini, right? So the main channel, when it's full, it will feed all the other channels so that they can become full. And then after that, then the energy becomes formed as you walk through life, mastering different aspects of your life, right? So, for example, the third chakra is connected to the human willpower, right? We do and we want to accomplish, we want to be abundant. Most people use their third chakra to make things happen, push, and manipulate, if they cannot push hard enough, right? Just trying to bring everything in, and that's at a great loss of energy. So when the third chakra become open, then it float up to the heart, and then your being become more soft and open. And then by the time it reaches your fifth chakra, in the outer world, you surrender your need to push and allow God or divine, your higher self, whatever you choose to call it, to move everything for you. You just have to be in the present, walking whatever you do, and then like through your mind, in a way, everything gets set up. It may not be the timing that you want it, because everyone wants everything today or yesterday. But certain process is going to take months and years. So all you need to do is to let go and just allow the process to flow, and everything will come to you.
So there is no shortcut or magic pill for that?
Well, as far as I know, no. I mean, maybe some other people have found a way, and that's why there are like so many courses on Mind Valley and a lot of places teaching people how to shortcut the system. I mean, what they do is basically teaching people magic, right, on how to manipulate reality to get what they want. So, so the line between white magic and black magic is very much slippery. So if you just like trying to use your understanding and ability to create or to get what you want, even like a boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever, it's a form of black magic. But people don't see it that way. People don't understand it that way. People just like, I want to manifest. I want to be a millionaire like yesterday or tomorrow or whatever. But everything has to take its course. For you to manifest something, you have to have the foundation for it, and this foundation has to be built. So, one of the delusion of the modern New Age is that they think that everything could be created, if you just focus on the intention and make it happen, that type of a thing, So anyway, people can do whatever they want. It's just a process, right? You can spend time, but then that is actually not what the spiritual path is all about anyway. You're just like playing around with fire, thinking that you're doing something big and magical, but it's just like, you're playing in a sandbox.
Yeah, so the spirits feed on your energy when you do this, actually. Yeah.
Well, I mean, even in the world of spirits, right? Mm-hmm. Many of the gurus, many of the teachers, many people who work with this kind of a chi, or like now people like to use the word woo-woo or whatever, they all tap into the space of the dark entities. Mm-hmm. Because it's easy, right? Even like some of the big gurus in India with like thousands of Western followers, sometimes I look at their photos like, whoa, I wouldn't even go there. So, and then because people want something, people don't know, like cannot, most of the time because the heart is not open, right? Because when the heart is not open, you're more dependent on the mind. And the mind is attracted to all the wrong things. People say this, oh, so beautiful. It's kind of like all the politicians. If they have to get elected, they'll tell you, oh, I will make you rich. I'll make you beautiful. I'll do everything for you. And then once they get elected, they just do everything opposite. It's the same kind of a sales job that you experience with a lot of these beings. Like they will draw you, they will woo you, they will show you some this and some that. But then how much of all that actually going to benefit your personal growth? And like going back to the story of my comic brother, Ramon. So, at the time that I started the spa, I rented this space in this building, right? And I didn't know that above my space, is a kind of like a well-known, he's a Chinese healer. He's like, that time he was in his 70s, but looked really strong, but it's still kind of like Chinese. Like his mentality, I can see that he's just like very focused on Chinese food. There's a certain, grayness to the skin, if you just eat like the Chinese food all the time. you have to like eat a variety of things to give yourself a little bit more resources and life force. Okay, but anyway, he's like at that time during the height of his thing, he was a very well-known healer. So he would line people up, and then he would throw his chi, into people's second chakra, and people actually walk out a little bit dazed, a little bit ecstatic, like kind of like they have some kind of an experience. So he was quite popular with some of the movie stars and things like that. But he's also like kind of humble, keeping his work quiet in a certain ways. So my friend Ramon is very sensitive, and his wife is like kind of like one of those gifted channelers and psychic, right? So so this man would draw them into the session to kind of like have their presence, So Ramon was telling me the story that one day while he was warming his chi up to ready to flow, and Ramon was always like, his eyes kind of like always in this kind of a stupor focus. And he was saying, man, from the corner of my eyes, I see a big entity behind him, preparing to feast, right? Because sometimes when you get the chi, you don't know what in return that you're giving back. Not in the form of money, of course, but it happens all the time. It's like a shortcut to fame in a way. If one wants a shortcut to fame in the healing world or in the spiritual world, it's full of it in shamanism in a way. Like shamanism is not a path of purity. So people who enter it tendency to get lost very easily because it works more on the lower desire realm and all of this stuff, right? So if the person doesn't have that kind of a strength, you just get sucked in, get used, and then they spit you out on the other end, because humans are just tools. Even though we are tools because we have a lack of understanding, and because we have access to the full spectrum of reality, like all the way from the hell and the demonic realms up to source or God, supreme, Brahma, whatever you call it. And we are unique that way. So our psychic energy is being harvested all the time. Earth is like a psychic energy farm for beings to kind of harvest our resources, right? So the entity will come and they also feed on all this stuff. So and that's where like in the old days, all the paths have all these long rules. Don't do this, don't do that. There's a reason for it. It has nothing to do with morality or sin or whatever. It has to do with when you're in the path, open yourself up energetically, then you're more prone to these entities coming to feed on you because you become more delicious. Mm-hmm. Instead of like being a McDonald's hamburger, you may be a sirloin steak. You know what I mean? So like the energy is different. So they would harvest and then they would give the person more energy, like power to attract and power to feel like, I'm so good at what I do. And that's where, in the old traditions, they don't accept people into the path who has no humility. Because without humility, you cannot clear yourself of this, kind of like intrusion. When a person has arrogance and that need to be great, but now, like the doors open, everybody can tap into it, and it also has its dangers, right? There's no free lunches, so sometimes we have to walk through the process to clear it and clear it and clear it. So anyway,
for example, what are those rules, like to keep yourself pure and to be
Oh
free
yeah,
from
those
entities?
rules.
Yeah.
No, I mean it can be as simple as, no bad thoughts, no stealing, no sleep with a man's wife, and up to like don't have sex, don't eat meat or whatever, right? So these rules are set there to help the person to maintain purity, but then they are not there for the sole purpose of telling people not what to do. It's because people lack the ability to master themselves. Therefore, these rules exist.
Okay, for example, how to keep purity and keep eating meat and fish?
Well, food is something that, okay, you have to see it from a different perspective, right? Like, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe the person who did the documentary was wrong, but I was watching this video of the Buddha. I think I think the Buddha Siddhartha, one of the Buddhas, I forgot which one. And his last meal was pork. So, and then, after all the Buddhas left, then you have religion, right? So religion is an attempt to transmit this higher process through more of the mass. And because once you have the mass, you will lose quality. Yeah, it's natural. It's not like a white supremacy kind of a thought, right? Because in our world, there's only so many people who are tall enough, strong enough, and capable enough to play basketball, to skate at that elite level, right? So when you talk about Buddha, it's like for human existence, they are like the cream of the crop in terms of their accomplishments, right? So in religion, then you can, bring in more people, then everything get more watered down, even way back then when things are still strong. So then when you have a big group of men together, like in China, they have monasteries that have like 15,000 monks. So telling them to eat soy, is to lower their male hormone so they're not aggressive. And then they don't have strong sexual desire, which help them to kind of like meditate more peacefully. And also, it's probably super expensive to feed 15,000 men in general, at a young age, they all eat a lot. So more like a practical purpose, right? Yes, I understand about the fear and the death hormone and all that stuff. But you have to look at also like the vehicle. We all built in a certain way, and we all need to eat the food that we need to eat in order to maintain a strong vehicle. Because if you don't have a strong vehicle, it ends everything. I mean, you can sit there and meditate for years and decades, but your nervous system can't handle it. Like the nervous system, is the system that assimilates light through the body, right? So when chi or force, whatever, hit the body, it hits the nervous system. And the nervous system will process that and then transmit it through all the cells and everything. And the cells are getting it too. Everything is getting it. But the nervous system is the thing that have to deal with it the most. Yeah, so there are actually quite a few people that I met that had spontaneous rising of the Kundalini, and the nervous system can't handle it, and their whole being is fried. So to me, how I look at it is more practical, right? So when the system is not strong, forget about your health, forget about your, your own inner path. Because to have a robust inner path, what it really means is that, you take a coarse piece of stone, and then you keep carving it and polishing and carving and polishing it for years to make a beautiful statue. So, as your vehicle rises to be able to bring in more energy, and the energy flowing in from the outside, flowing up from the inside at the stronger volume and rate, and the more that you can hold, the stronger your nervous system has to be, the stronger your health has to be in general. I mean, if you look at a lot of the Indian gurus, most of them very unhealthy looking.
True.
Most of them, even like the accomplished ones, right? Even like Sri Aurobindo, it's like when he was in his late 60s, he just couldn't do the work anymore. And he basically left his body for other reasons, but one of the reasons, like, my body's fried. So he tells the mother, you're gonna stay and you're gonna do the work, and I'm gonna go on the other side to do the work. Had he stayed in his body to try to carry forward the work, it may be a much slower process, in the grand scheme of things, right? So, on his deathbed before he left, he transferred all his force to her. And then she heckled it for another 20 some years until she's like 90 something, because her genetic is stronger and her health is more robust, right? She's from like partly Turkish, partly French, partly Jewish, so the DNA is stronger, and she probably was much better fed. Well, she was much better fed when she was younger than he was. He spent most of his childhood starving, so he never have a very strong frame. So it's just looking at that from a practical view, right? A lot of the Sri Aurobindo followers who are, fundamentalists, probably thinking that I'm just like putting down the Sri Aurobindo and the mother and the path, but I'm not. I'm just looking at it from a very practical and pragmatic view. Like Ramakrishna, when he was 39, he looked like an old man. And he just like, one day he's like, I cannot take it anymore, and he leave. The same thing with many, many, many of the gurus. They just don't know how to take care of their body. So anyway, so this kind of body structure is very important. Okay, what does one need to do? But the process of transformation, it also helped to clear the being. Like in the, in my reading into Taoism and Zen Buddhism, there is a state when one can arrive at that one doesn't need food at all. But then that is already in a rather advanced state of accomplishment, where your body is full of qi, and then you can feed off the qi by yourself. But then if you do it too early, because you think you're holier and you can, that you can do it, pushing your body through it, it won't work. You kind of like in a deep state of meditation, right? In some level of samadhi, like your breath will slow down so much that you hardly breathe. And that is not possible. You have to walk around and you talk and you function in life. You need more oxygen. But then when you're in that state, the qi will replace the oxygen. And then your heartbeat slows down, and then your mind becomes even more still, and then you go deeper and deeper and deeper, where like A yogi can stop breathing for some hours or some days, and his heart start beating or like once in so many minutes instead of pop, 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 all the time. So these are kind of like states of accomplishment that one arrive at naturally if one cultivate, right? But then you take someone who have very little accomplishment in this realm, and then you read about, oh yeah, so and so didn't need to eat. Oh, I don't need to eat also.
Okay. Do you think it's an evolutionary step for the majority of people that they're going to reach in some years that they will not eat food at all?
Well, perhaps anything is possible, but evolution also happens when you self-cultivate and shift your being into that state, right? I mean, if you take a normal person and you just say, oh yeah, don't worry about it, the universal energy going to take you there, you can do whatever you want, and it won't happen. Even people who are a little bit more serious and have these kind of a somewhat of a practice or even a deep practice, this idea, going back to our initial idea of qi, it has to be activated. It kind of like you see somebody who's on the path for a long time and they're glowing. They may be skinny, whether they may be fat, but then their qi is glowing and they look very harmonious and kind of like expand even into the 80 and 90 years old, which nowadays is very rare to find, right? You find more of the guys that like do the path and then their being shrink. There's kind of like a dryness to it. Not only like a dryness in the physical tissue, but like a dryness in the countenance, how they look. That is a person that don't move qi. Like in a Taoist system, you have Jing, Qi, and Shen. Jing is like the fluid, the hormonal, that's the water element of the body. And it's as refined, it's in every cell structure, kind of like a spark of light. And then healthy people who move qi usually have this kind of a abundance, like doesn't matter how old the person is, there's a certain amount of juiciness to the being, right? And that's one of the things about people who don't cultivate and don't tap into their qi happen to them, is that with time, the system dries out. It just means that the jing become depleted. So then a part of the using of the herbs to help with this replenishment of the jing. And that is very deep in the old way of looking at Chinese medicine. Jing, Qi, and Shen. And then, when the Jing is abundant, then the Shen will be abundant. I mean, the Qi will become abundant, right? And then when the Qi expanded, rise to a certain level, then the Shen, the spirit, become harmonious. It's basically vibrating a certain frequency, and then the mind become calm. And so this is not just theories, right? This is a reality of how a system works. It just explained in a certain way from a certain perspective of looking at things. So, so there's really no problem with eating meat if one needs it to kind of support the system while one walks through this process. And perhaps at a later stage, when the system is ready to go with little food or a certain type of food or no food, then you just naturally step into it. You don't have to believe. So anyway, that is just how I perceive this whole thing.
Wonderful. Okay, Hank, we've discussed a lot about personal growth and personal path. Now, I would like to ask you how you feel, what is happening globally at the moment, energy-wise and spirit-wise. So, what's the stage that our planet is living through at the moment, and which forces are affecting this transition?
Okay, well, there are like two main ways that I'm seeing it, right? And they're interlinked. So let's start with like Sri Aurobindo's work, yeah, because his incarnate into a human body in the recent past was to fast forward the human evolution. So his work is actually a lot about transformation into this being that he called the supramental being. Have nothing to do with the mind. Supra, it means beyond mind. So like historically, the spiritual path is mostly about the transformation of the mind. But he came to transform matter itself, not just the physical body, but all matter. So the crux of the story, it actually took me a long time to get to it, because what happened was he never talked about it. And he write a lot about all the different spiritual paths, and he kind of like have this big painting of how reality works and the cosmos, God, and how everything's interconnected. And he would draw it in a lot of detail with words. And so by understanding that, it's great, but then it still does not convey the essence of why he was here. So it took me some years later, by meeting some friends in Oroville, that pointed me to some other work by this man named Satprem, who's like a follower of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. Well, he's more like a follower of the Mother in a way, and they have a very deep bond. So while she was in her room for about 20 years, because she didn't leave the room, to do her cellular transformation, he would come every Wednesday and Saturday and take notes of her experiences. And from his notes, then it was better understood of why Sri Aurobindo were here. And it's also like the reason why he never say anything to anyone, because at that time, nobody would have understood him. They would think that he's a madman sitting in his room for 24 years, walking around doing his thing. So because most of the Indian mentality about guru, they expect the guru to do all the guru things, like bowing and basically just like being a follower, right? So Sri Aurobindo does his work, or did his work, and then he also like bring a lot of people in to kind of like the next generations of the people that follow onto his work. So anyway, so it's really about the transformation of the human body, where it can become more godlike. It's kind of like a complicated story of how he went about it. It's not what people think it is, like you ascend. No, you go the other way. At the beginning, he was trying to ascend and then do whatever that he thought, but then it didn't work. So he had to go inward through all the thick layers of the subconscious, that darkness, whatever, to find his way. out into the other loop, into the source, through this vehicle. It's interesting because historically the path has always been up, right? But then you cannot transform the body by going up. You can transform the body down to the very depth of the human experience through physical matter and beyond, in the deeper, like the source of the subconscious that created physical matter. Like, so even back then, he already, like, if you read some of his books, he kind of foresaw like the chaos and the transformation and the thing that will happen on the planet. So there's a very special day every 4 years for those who follow Sri Aurobindo. It's the February 29th. And I think it started 1956 or something like that. I'm not exactly sure about the date. And that is the day that this layer of reality that Sri Aurobindo calls supramental enter the mother's body in a concrete way, right? Even now, if you go to Sri Aurobindo's ashram, if you go up to his room to like get a darshan, or like 2 or 3 times a year, you can go to the mother's room. It's a mind-blowing experience. Like the energy is so thick. You walk into the ashram, and then the energy just go into you, right? And it pulls you, and then you sit down, and you're like in this space. You cannot say that you're in Samadhi or not Samadhi, but the force just move inside and work. It's nothing like one had experienced before, and that's why like I'm so hooked onto it. Like in the past, before COVID, for some years I was going there like twice a year, like for about 2 or 3 months, to just have a chance to be in that space, to let the vibration, kind of through osmosis, flowing through my cellular level, right? So for that transformation to be complete, all the forces of darkness has to be terminated in a way, like the falsehood and death and everything. So we are kind of like at a human level, because whatever happened in the spiritual level will eventually manifest in the physical level, because it has to be cleared also in the physical realms. So this is actually a war that has been happening for thousands of years, right? So what we see like in Russia and Ukraine, it's just the beginning of a spiritual war that manifests in physical reality. Because Ukraine holds it's like the head of the snake. I'm not talking about the Ukrainian people. I'm talking about the politicians and the oligarchs, those who control the country, have turned it into a space where this other forces are coming to control, and they use Ukraine as the center of their activities. So that is one of the main reasons why Russia is attacking it, right? So from my understanding is Russia is not really acting alone. Like on the planet, there's different groups of what the people in the US call the white hats. People who understand history, understand what's going on, understand that humans have been enslaved for thousands of years by this group of beings. So it's linked to also like this negative ETs, right? So then they control the humans that control the mass, through the financial system. The financial system is basically a slavery system for a long time. You know, every time we use a paper money, there's already a percentage of the tax included in it because it's skimmed off from the top. And that's why it takes more paper money to buy things, right? Every time, every month, every year, things get more expensive partly because they print more money and partly because they skim off this resource that we have to work for, right? At the higher level of these beings, I mean, they just print. It's like free money for them, but for us to earn any ruble or any dollar, euros at all, we have to trade in our life force and our time. So it's a super unjust system, right? And then all the layer of taxation that we pay. People think, oh, I don't have to pay tax. But when you fly somewhere, the tax is already included. When you buy petrol, when you buy food, everything has its taxation. So, and the taxation is necessary because the money system that we use now is not real money, right? So, but then it goes a lot beyond that. Like mind control is very prevalent, through TV, through certain narrative that the government gives, right? So like last week was something like that. Russia passed a law saying that news outlets that give misinformation going to go to jail. And then CNN and CBC shut their doors in Russia and moved because the law was intended for the Western news outlets that have been lying for many, many years and decades to shape people's mind. So, and this actually has to do with something that we kind of passed through earlier about the human mind and our psychic energy. That is like more valuable than gold and diamond, right? It's like a currency for a level of existence that can harvest it. Because it doesn't exist outside of the human realm, and then they can use it for whatever purpose that they use it for. So we kind of create our reality, right? So if you believe that somebody is good, even though the person is not good, but then if you can use your media to say he is a good guy, so enough people believe in this good guy, then he has power. And then if you take away all this kind of a mind control, and people all of a sudden see the guy to be something that he is not, and then he will lose control, right? So these are the games that have been playing with humanity for a long time, and that is also like related to what I'm saying, that people just react. But then if people are willing to step outside of their normal box and learn something new, something different of how our reality works, then you can have more of a sovereignty over your being, because you're not manipulated to expand your psychic resource to where it didn't have to. Like so anyway, so a lot of this is going on. So this war that's happening now is not about Russia or Ukraine. It's more of a cleaning of this dark Satanist type of energy from our planet. And that's why it's going to take years, because within every country, most of the government in the world are corrupted by the system, right? So, and it goes very deep. It's not just the president. It's not just the senators. It could be like your school teacher, that are programmed for this kind of a system. Like in the U.S. now, it's popular to see white people as a problem to everything. So that is a part of the programming, right? So then it go down to the layer of the teachers and the supervisors of the school and the principals, and they believe in that, in propaganda. So they force the school to teach these things to the children. So this is how deep it is. And that's why it would take a long time to kind of like clear all these rot from humanity. Of course, there'll be chaos. Of course, there's going to be a collapse of the old system that we are born into and we all rely on, right? So like, imagine if the financial system collapses. Like, even it's happening now, like the euros have lost a lot of value. And at some point, the dollar going to lose a lot of value. And then so is, the rupiah, the whatever, whatever, like the British pound. So actually Russia, did like something that is quite good for humanity, that it will eventually back the ruble with gold, because our paper money have gotten off gold ever since 1971, right? So we're just like printing. And the US is like $30 trillion in debt. That's a lot of debt. And probably higher, because the $30 trillion is what they admit to, right? So they may be like a few thousand trillion that they, that they printed. So every time they print money, it means that your ruble or your dollar are going to worth less. So they're just like various ways of robbing people's resources. And then so this is where things are at. And it's going to probably be for some years. Even this thing of the COVID that we all experience is a planned process, to kill as many people as possible. Now, I don't know, like the information that's available in Russia and other places, but in the US now, there are already people are awakened to the level that they see that the Pfizer and the Moderna is actually committing murder. So the people who are damaged by the vaccine are starting to sue these companies. So and eventually I feel like within our lifetime, we will see like humanity under a new space. Because we have never experienced humanity to be free, right? I mean, like in most countries, if you want to start a business, which is usually most people who start business because they have passion about something, or they think they have an idea that would benefit other people, and therefore they can, make some money from it, which is like a natural exchange. And you have to deal with so many stupid ass rules along the way in order for you to even start something. Right? So, and then now we are getting like for thousands of years, the power come from the center. And then, it diffuse outward. And now we're going back to, the power is within the population. And it's not in one source, and in a way, that's the whole idea of cryptocurrency. People can become their own bank. Like if I own a certain amount of Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever crypto I have, I don't have to run to the bank, to get it from the bank, to pay for something, and then you have to pay whatever tax, whatever fee, and they know, my privacy of what I'm purchasing. I can just buy it directly from you, make a transfer, and it's between us. So you take the power away from the banking system, which have been sucking our blood for a long time. So in a way, I kind of like, yes, there's chaos and there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of uncertainty and all this stuff, but I also feel like it's a necessary step, first of all. I mean, because we have more love and light, it doesn't mean that these dark beings are going to say, oh yeah, you can have the power, we're just going to slink off somewhere and die. Of course, it's not going to do that. They're going to hang on to power and they're going to fight it.
And take other forms, not to be recognized.
Sure. And that's where like the war has been fought for thousands of years. In the spiritual realm, filtering down to the more concrete realm. Otherwise we would not have arrived at this space in human history, that we can do this in a 3D reality. Everything is ripening toward that, right? So like once this whole system the old system is collapsed and the new system comes out, then there's a lot of the inventions that have been suppressed for so long. Free energy, space travel, you can heal the body, with medical devices, and the elimination of toxicity in our food and in our environment. All of it is doable, right? I mean, the intention all along, even like with the food processing and all the chemicals that they put into herbs and food and water, is to kind of like slow people down. I mean, I see like government and all of these guys are like mucus in the body, Their job is to slow things down. But then once the human spirit can be free to create without any people telling, oh, you cannot do that because of such and such a rule, or you need to have a certain amount of money to do that because of then just imagine the level of creativity. I mean, humans in general are just creative. We all have that ability to create and then take a few things together and make something better. In a way, kind of like Ming herbs, right? I mean, you kind of take all these herbs from all over the world and then slam them together into something. I mean, we have formulas that are more, more traditional, whether Chinese or the East or the West, and we have formula that's just like a hodgepodge of everything. And then you just refining it.
How can a person order your teas?
Well, they can either go to my website, like hung-wang.com, and then on the homepage, there's a little tea something to buy stuff. They can click on that, and then all the products shows up. Or like they can go to mingherbs.com and order.
All the links you will find under the video. So also Hung has some videos recorded about Qigong.
Yeah, most of that is more like on YouTube. Yeah.
Okay. Do you teach people online?
Well, at the moment, I don't really have any program that I share on my own website for that. I recorded some of the classes and programs from Mind Valley, but I was thinking it also like it's almost time for me to create something.
Okay, so the people can now access the videos on YouTube. So is it right that they are free?
Yeah. Well, it's more like I talk a lot about the herbs and some aspect of Qigong and the practice itself. So they're free and people can use them any way that they, feel like they can benefit from it.
Okay, can people access you for some more online sessions, for private sessions?
It's possible. Yeah, I'll be traveling, so I don't know like how to call. Yeah, if people are interested, so So what I do online are like, I can do like a health consult. You know, if people just want to have like a more well-rounded idea, so I would consult them on nutrition, like what they eat. Most people would have certain symptoms, and then how to use the herb to fix them, and how to support the body with nutrition that they need. You know, I am not limited by certain beliefs, right? So is whatever that I perceive that the person needs, I would express it. And then like some people insist on being vegetarian. So I can talk to them about how you can be vegetarian in a better way, or vegan or whatever. So yeah, it's all possible. And then the other online thing that I do is remote chi healing.
So that is interesting.
Yeah, well, it kind of like energy healing in a way, but then I'm doing it from where I am and the person receiving it from where they are.
Yeah, this works very well.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. It's actually a quite an energy intensive experience, you know, so.
Yes, I know. I practice energy healing as well. I know how powerful it can work even
Yeah.
at a distance. Yeah.
Yeah, but it also like takes a certain amount of resource.
Oh, yes. That is true. I'm now drinking this wonderful tea. So this is chillax.
Yeah, chillax.
So which herbs are there?
Well, chillax has like some of these herbs that like skullcap and things like that to kind of support the nervous system. So when I make herbs, you know, it's not just for one purpose, right? Because like for most people who have stress, most of the herbal formulas, people make it usually to sedate your nervous system. You know, so when you sedate the nervous system, of course, you feel more calm. But it's just like that purpose. So I use the herbs like skullcap, and maybe I don't remember all the ingredients in there. But it not only helped the nervous system to calm down, but then it also nourishes the nervous system. And then I put in spirit poria. Spirit poria is like a Shen tonic in the Chinese system. Like it basically, you liven up the spirit. You know, you want to show explain that. So like Shen stabilizing herbs are very important because it had to do with calming the spirit. And then not only is the body going to be sedated, but you feel like this fullness, you know, in the being also. So, but at least that's the intention, right? And then I usually put in some other herbs to support the kidneys and the adrenals, because the adrenals control the nervous system. So when the nervous system is overly active, we actually lose a lot of energy, because we lose energy from looking, from hearing, from smelling, from feeling, sensing. So all of these activities will expand a certain amount of qi from the body. You know, and that's where like most of the practitioners, cultivators, once they achieve a certain amount of accomplishment, they will go away into like a more quiet space to kind of preserve the qi, right? Or they can see something and it's really overstimulating for them because they can see more than that thing that's coming at them.
I know.
Yeah. So anyway, so this kind of like a way of harmonizing the being, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a wonderful tea.
Thank you.
All right. If you want to buy some of the teas, they can be shipped worldwide. Is that
Yeah,
right?
mostly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you can check the website. So this is under the video. So Hang's contacts on his website. You will not regret. So these herbal medicines are really miraculous.
Yeah. Well, if we have time, I'd like to add that like the herbal system within Ming Herbs and within the Happy Tea is actually a relatively complete healing system by themselves. You know, because you have a certain amount of herbs that help to detox the body, which is needed. And then like you have your supporting herbs that would help to nourish the internal organs and the glands. And then we just like created a post-vax series for people who had the vax, and then they want to kind of clear the system of the side effects of the vax, you know, and that is also possible.
So that is very important. I think many people will be interested, because my cousin who lives in the United States, she was asking me, you know, what I can recommend, because all the family had this popular disease, and you know they got waxed.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm just trying to create these things that will be like helpful, you know, to a certain process. Yeah.
So that is very important, and I think it's a great job.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Hang. It was a very interesting conversation.
Thank you so much, Maria, for having me on your show.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
So all the links are above, so you can contact Hang directly. Our channel has an affiliate code. If you order using the link below the video, you will get a 10% discount.